coronavirus. FEMA preparing for possible coronavirus emergency declaration. To me, this is another indication that the President and the White House are finally aware of the gravity of the situation, said former FEMA official Michael Cohen. Washington. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is planning for the possibility that President Donald Trump could make an emergency declaration to bring in extra funds and personnel to assist the administration's coronavirus response, according to internal documents obtained by NBC News. FEMA officials are preparing for an infectious disease emergency declaration by the President that would allow the agency to provide disaster relief funding to state and local governments, as well as federal assistance to support the coronavirus response, according to agency planning documents reviewed by NBC News. An emergency declaration would allow FEMA to provide disaster medical assistance teams, mobile hospitals, and military transport, among other kinds of federal support, Manning said.
The Seattle area has become the focus of emerging coronavirus cases in this country. 4 more deaths announced there today, bringing the number of dead to at least 6, many patients at a nursing facility. Since the weekend, cases have popped up across the country, including Florida, New York, and New Hampshire. The nation's top infectious disease official telling NBC News today the virus has reached outbreak proportions. We have expanded coverage starting now with Miguel Almaguer.
As the death toll rises in Washington state, today at this Seattle area nursing home where several patients died of the coronavirus, emergency teams were back. Fearing an outbreak, dozens of residents and first responders are now under isolation. Nearby at a local hospital, several patients are in critical condition, already suffering from underlying health conditions.
I'm very frightened.
Carmen Gray's mother, Susan, is being treated at the nursing home.
I think that she's sitting in a petri dish, that it's just a matter of time.
With FEMA preparing for a possible emergency declaration from the President, researchers in Washington state fear the virus may have been spreading here for weeks. Amid growing fear, this Seattle skyscraper was shut down today for cleaning after an employee was exposed to a coronavirus patient. Across the country, over 100 confirmed cases in more than a dozen states.
This is New York. We're a gateway to the world. You see all these cases around the world, around the country. Of course we're going to have it here.
Today, some schools shutting down as a precaution. At voting centers across the country, extra care ahead of Super Tuesday.
This is why vote by mail makes perfect sense in this election.
Across the globe, in Italy, a hot spot. 18 more deaths today. The world's busiest museum, the Louvre in Paris, is closed indefinitely. But in China, where the crisis began, a bright spot, with numbers falling fast. Back in California, at Travis Air Force Base, evacuees who were under isolation were cleared to go home today.
I can hardly wait to get home. It's been quite a trip.
But in Texas, one evacuee from Wuhan, who tested negative for the virus twice, was cleared from a military quarantine, then later tested positive for the illness after visiting a local shopping mall.
We simply cannot have a screw-up like this from our federal partners.
With healthcare workers at high risk, at least 2 who treated a sick Sacramento patient are now sick themselves and under isolation. Tonight, those who help in need of care, as the virus turns deadly here at home and continues to spread.
What happened in the nursing home behind me is one of the biggest fears for health officials, the spread of the coronavirus in a tightly contained area. 4 of the 6 people who lost their lives in this area lived inside that facility behind me. Lester, the focus now is on containing the spread. Yeah, I can only imagine the anxiety there. Miguel, warning that a pandemic is likely. It comes from one of the government's top health officials who has spent much of his career on the front lines of outbreaks. Richard Engel spoke today with Dr. Anthony Fauci.
At Washington's National Institutes of Health, America's top virus control official, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says the coronavirus is spreading and America may need to take drastic actions.
What are we dealing with this coronavirus, COVID-19? We're dealing with clearly an emerging infectious disease that has now reached outbreak proportions and likely pandemic proportions. How lethal is it? So right now, if you look at the people who just come to the attention of the health authorities, that's 2 to 2.5%. But even if it goes down to 1%, that's still very, very serious.
So serious, worldwide the flu, which we've gotten used to, kills 300 to 650,000 people a year. That's just 0.1% of the people it infects. Coronavirus, even if low estimates are correct, appears to be far more deadly.
So if it went from 2% to 1, you were still 10 times more lethal than the standard influenza that we get on a seasonal basis.
People are scared. When you ride the subway and somebody coughs right now, you can see the fear on people's face. Are they right? If somebody's coughing on the bus, should you get off?
No, getting off is not going to help.
What about sporting events? What about concerts?
We're not there yet. But if and when we do, and it may be when, because we're seeing a lot of community spread, we need to be at least thinking about the possibility if we get a major outbreak of this coronavirus in this country. That would mean perhaps closing schools temporarily, getting people to do more teleworking, canceling events where there is a lot of crowds in confined places, canceling unnecessary travel so that you're not on an airplane for 5 hours with a bunch of people who might be infected.
That would be a huge step. It would have enormous economic, societal, psychological implications.
It would, but it would be temporary, but it would be necessary.
There are people who are shrugging this off, saying, it's just like the flu.
It's not, because it's brand new. When you have a brand new virus in which no one has had any experience before, that gives the virus kind of an open roadway to spread.
Richard Engel, NBC News, Washington.
Much more from Richard in his special report, Outbreak, Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC. Impact of the coronavirus among the many issues the Trump administration is dealing with, including development of a vaccine and travel restrictions. Hallie Jackson is at the White House.
The coronavirus crisis now perhaps triggering even tighter travel restrictions on top of what's already in place for China, Italy, Iran, and South Korea.
Yes, we are to certain countries where they have more of a breakout.
Can you elaborate on specifically what countries you're looking at?
The nature of the European Union is one doesn't require a passport to move around, so our task force spoke today about new cases, and there were some in several European countries. We're following that very closely.
Few specifics so far as the president huddled with top pharmaceutical executives who promised to push to develop a virus vaccine that's still at minimum months away. On Wall Street, better news. Stocks soaring after last week's coronavirus sell-off. The Dow's biggest points gain just 4 days after its biggest points drop ever. The White House considering tax cuts to try and stimulate the economy, according to an official familiar with the discussions, though the president's pointing at the Federal Reserve.
I'm sure the Fed is looking at it. I hope the Fed is looking at it. They should be, but a lot of the central banks are looking at it for stimulus.
On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are hammering out details of a compromise that would direct billions to the coronavirus response, while the president is again accusing Democrats of fear-mongering. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says it's President Trump spending more time playing the blame game.
The president is downplaying. He is downplaying the threat of the coronavirus to a dangerous degree.
With the White House hoping to show they're fully focused on the crisis, a messaging blitz planned for this week. From daily briefings expected to a visit to NIH headquarters tomorrow and later this week, meetings with CEOs of airlines and cruise lines. And while NBC News has learned that FEMA has been preparing for a possible emergency declaration by President Trump, the president says today he does not think a national emergency is necessary right now, although he's not ruling it out in the future. Lester?
All right, Hallie, thanks. The impact...
News has learned that FEMA has been preparing for a possible emergency declaration by President Trump. The president says today he does not think a national emergency is necessary right now, although he's not ruling it out in the future. Lester?
All right, Hallie, thanks. The impact of the coronavirus being felt across the country, now affecting everything from air travel to schools. to what's on store shelves or what's not on store shelves in some case. Some retailers seeing a run on many of the basics. Our Tom Costello has more on that.
Across the country, sporadic reports tonight of store shelves emptied out as Americans stock up to hunker down. From bottled water to toilet paper to disinfecting wipes.
These kind of things which will help you sanitize, they're flying off the shelf.
Should the coronavirus grow into a pandemic, Homeland Security recommends having a 2-week supply of food on hand.
The items that are likely to disappear from the shelves, number one is going to be bottled water, canned foods of all kinds, frozen foods that have a short list of ingredients.
The virus's spread has forced the cancellation of trade shows and meetings, a global energy conference in Houston, a major science gathering in Denver. The Miami School District is now preparing 250,000 laptops and tablets for students to work from home in case the virus forces some schools to close.
We know it's not ideal, but it would provide a continuity of the educational process to kids who may have to be kept home and not at school.
Tonight, more universities are suspending study abroad programs in Asia and Italy. Airlines now canceling flights into Italy as American joins JetBlue and Alaska Airlines in waiving ticket change fees over coronavirus fears. A major travel insurance provider says business is up 150%, with travelers anxious to protect their trips from the virus, especially overseas.